is Wednesday, February 16th. It is 7 p.m. and we have two cases this evening. I will note that the case number 22-1 for Deborah Drive, the applicant has requested to withdraw that application. This was for a garage and shed on the property. We have a letter from the applicant's attorney. Please be advised that the applicant seeks to withdraw the above referenced application from the public hearing before the Zoning Board of Appeals scheduled for tonight in order to allow the applicant the opportunity to file an amended application requesting a variance. So if you're here for the Deborah Road case, that is being withdrawn at the request of the applicant. Do we have to vote on that?
So yes.
Yeah, okay. So could I have a motion to allow the applicant for Deborah Drive to withdraw the application for case number 22-1?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Jane, seconded by Drew. Any further discussion? We expect them to come back, but this is to withdraw. No further discussion? Okay, voting on this will be the 5 regular board members. And those those board members are Jane Coffey, Drew Delaney, I'm John Lee, Dave Andrews, and Bob Fitzgerald. Sorry, Dave. Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained, so carried. Okay. Okay, so now the next case we have is case number 20-21, Wall Street Development Corporation, 48 Burns Ave. This is for, on remand from the Housing Appeals Committee, request for project change, amendment to a comprehensive permit under General Laws 40B. So, where we left off last time on this, the applicant was going to pay for the peer review, and we have with us tonight the peer reviewer, Sean Reardon from Tetra Tech. Good evening, Sean. Nice to see you. I should also just take a quick moment to introduce the whole board with us tonight. We have Tim Hegler with us. We have Mark Major. I already introduced the 5 regular board members, and with us we have Patrick Deschaines from the Community Development. We have Stephen Natola, our Administrative Secretary, and Town Council George Pucci. And in the audience is alternate board member Judy Conroy. Okay, so before we get going, this is Burns Ave, and we're ready to have the peer reviewer explain where we're at on the peer review that was conducted. Do you want to come forward and, yep, right up to the microphone. We have the set of plans with us and the report from Tetra Tech. So, yeah, I should also explain. Right now, you do not need to have a mask if you are fully vaccinated, and if you are not fully vaccinated, you should wear a mask. If you have underlying health conditions or people at home that you're trying to protect, you don't need to wear a mask. So, if you're not vaccinated, please have a mask on. Okay.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Sean Reardon. I'm with Tetra Tech. We've been asked to help the ZBA review the current proposal for Burns Ave. A little bit different animal this time around. Usually we're involved real early on, work through a lot of details. In this case, the project has a long history. We've spent a lot of time getting up to speed, working with Patrick to do that. It's gone through a pretty hefty level of review as part of its first approval with you. It's also gone through a review of the proposed change with Concom. So from our perspective, there's been a lot of sort of insight brought to the project. There's been a lot of review. So we're starting at a much more refined point. I've reviewed Rob's work before. He and I understand what we're looking for. There were a few things that we look for that Beta hadn't asked in prior situations. Rob was nice enough to incorporate that in some recent submittals. The big takeaway from us was just the plan doesn't reflect what the superseding order of conditions, what DEP approved. So DEP and the Concom specifically denied building 3. yet the plan still shows building 3. So from our standpoint, a lot of the technical work, well done, complete. Our comments now are relatively minor and all within the scope of sort of things that can be managed. We overwhelmingly think that the addition of the connection to Brook Lane is a very positive thing. Eliminating that long cul-de-sac, allowing utilities to connect through the site, all of those things are positive. So now it's just a matter of, from our standpoint, just making sure all the documentation is in place and clean, so that when you go to make a decision, the decision is easy to formulate and easy to write a series of conditions from. So from our standpoint, a couple minor things that we considered is, now that the connection to Brook Lane is there, we'd recommend moving the construction entrance to that street rather than the extension of Burns Avenue, because it just passes fewer homes. It's a quicker access to Union Street. We recommended a few changes to the traffic plan. The traffic plan didn't really address, they had originally proposed mitigation on Burns Avenue, but really didn't sort of give any ideas as to whether anything needed to happen on Brook Lane as well. So we'd like to see that modified to address that concern. The stormwater, again, that was very well developed. But the awkward thing there is when we review stormwater, you really pay attention to how much impervious area, how much roof, how the routing works. When we contemplate a change that eliminates a building, that changes things. So we just want to make sure that everything is documented and clean. Everything we've seen so far looks to be in order. What we're waiting for now is just sort of admittedly one submission that helps me understand what exactly we're approving. If it were one of my recommendations and the plan came here, my recommendation was this isn't approvable because it doesn't comply with the superseding order of conditions. So square one is come up with a plan that is approvable or workable given the input from DEP. But beside that, I think the technical work is all strong, and I think most of the science is pretty good.
Okay. So we're seeing the plan. We all have a small plan in front of us. How complicated is it to have the applicant and the applicant's engineer redo this plan and submit a buildable plan to the zoning board?
From my perspective, it doesn't seem like very much work at all. But I don't know what the plan is for addressing DEP's concerns were. So DEP gave them a few options on how they could address the riverfront issues. How the applicant plans to do that, I don't know. I know the building's got a little bit bigger with the change to connect to Brook Lane. So it doesn't seem like a very difficult change, but again, I don't know what is contemplated. Because
the problem that I have, and I think the whole board would have at this point, is there's a plan before us that's unbuilt. That's not, the plan that we have is not buildable.
Correct.
Okay. And you're being asked to review something that is unbuildable.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. So, but overall, you thought if you had an updated plan, it would be, there's nothing glaring that you see as a big problem showstopper.
No, and that's clearly due to the level of work that you guys did originally. I mean, all those issues have been addressed largely. Usually we're starting at a much more rough point and we're working through some pretty gross details. Now it's, well, I think all those things have been worked through, and now it's just a matter of sort of making sure everything is in line with the proposal, so that when it comes to making a decision, I mean, right now, for me to write a letter with a fine review of this I'd be spending more time qualifying my comments because the plan doesn't reflect a buildable project. So
I understand that.
I think it's, once the plan gets done, I think it's a relatively simple process going forward from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So, board members, do you have any questions or for the peer review?
Just had one. One of the suggestions you had was to consider the eventual disposition of the land, the balance of the land and the cul-de-sac. Can you speak a little bit more about that? What sort of disposition you're
Sure.
thinking about?
So as you're all, Brook Lane comes to a cul-de-sac turnaround. The beauty of the proposal is now they don't need a cul-de-sac turnaround on their project. But similarly, this is no longer required because now there's through access through Burns Avenue. The obvious question is that's a pretty good sized chunk of land. Just seems to make sense that it should be clarified on what's gonna happen to it and, you know, what's its eventual disposition. I don't know if Brook Lane is a public road or a private road.
It's a public road.
So that would be town space. But it would be nice to sort of deal with it now under this forum, because I think you're the appropriate group to do that.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, Mr. Petrosi, we'll be getting back to you, Sean, I'm
Okay.
sure.
Thank you. And I just want to address Sean's comments regarding the DEP superseding order of conditions. And quite honestly, the Conservation Commission approved the project with the exception of one issue that we had a dispute over, and that had to do with what's called degraded area within the riverfront area. And so, as Sean mentioned, it affects Building 3. But it doesn't affect the entirety of Building 3. And as DEP gave us the option in the superseding order to come back to them with to reposition these two units that are shaded in brown. This is what we would call, what's called non-degraded area, which is called virgin land that was never disturbed before. So rather than revise the plan before we came to the board, we thought it would be best to get the board's comments and feedback on the entire project and then figure out where we would reposition those units. And as mentioned in the superseding order, we have the ability to attach units to the end of buildings or shift buildings further down. And we'd rather not do that, just guessing what the zoning board comments might be. And I'm perfectly happy with a condition from the board that says that we need to make sure that there are no buildings within the non-degraded riverfront area, because that's really what the intent of the superseding order is. And if it turns out that we can only get 38 units, then that's what we live with, 38 units. I will say that we did, these buildings, the units are a little bit bigger than what was originally approved by the board, so we could have squeezed 50 units in here if we used those same footprints. So I'm just looking for a little bit of latitude. If we can't get the 40 units in there by moving those two units, everything that we've designed is really going to be over-designed, because the drainage would be for the 40 units and the utilities would be, everything would be for 40 units. But if we can only do 38, then everything is over-designed from a drainage standpoint and a utility standpoint. So that's really all, and as Sean has said, we could come back here in a week and just lop off those two units and have a 2-unit building sitting there amongst the rest of the buildings, and we'd prefer not to do that. at this
The
point.
zoning board isn't gonna design your project for you, because if we did, it probably wouldn't be looking like this. And you don't want us to design the project for you. So what you need to do is come in with a set of plans that reflects what you can build, or what you wanna build. Because right now, you know that you cannot, you gave us a set of plans that you know can't be built because the superseding order of conditions.
Well, we know it can be, we know that the roadway and everything else can be built,
But
so.
the set of plans that shows the position of the buildings, that cannot be built. And you're asking us to approve something that is unbuildable. And you've already spent your money on the peer review for it. You're spending your time, our time on it. And I think we need to get a set of plans that shows exactly what you're proposing, and then we can go from there.
Well-
Town council, is it right for the zoning board to expect to have a set of plans that reflect what can be built?
Yeah, first of all, good evening, Mr. Chair, George Pucci from Town Council's office. Yes, I agree with you. It seems to me the peer reviewer's recommendations too, that he can't even provide a report that isn't conditioned throughout, that is subject to further revision.
Okay. Okay. Board members, any questions or comments?
I agree.
So, may I just interject, from what I hear from Tetra Tech or Sean, is that the project, other than that building 3, the project is good to go?
No. I don't,
That's what I'm saying, that's what I'm hearing, so, I mean, so,
how about this? Don't put words in somebody's mouth. Put the right plan in front of us that's a buildable plan. Sean never stood here and said it's good to go. He said he didn't see any, major issues, but we're not ready to say that, it's buildable, because he can't do a full review of it. You've given us a plan that's unbuildable. So-
okay, so we disagree on that, but
Okay,
that's all I'm gonna say.
what do we disagree about? Is this plan that you submitted buildable?
This plan is buildable, yes.
And you're gonna violate the DEP superseding order of conditions?
It's one of two ways this would go. Either I go to DEP and ask for modification, or I come back here and ask for modification. So I'm trying to streamline the process a little bit by getting the input from this board first with a condition, and then go back to DEP and say, this is what the zoning board has allowed us to do. We're gonna modify the plan as they've allowed us to do it.
I'm not gonna, and I don't know if other
There's
board
nothing-
members feel they're gonna vote on a plan that's
No.
Okay?
not buildable.
I'm not gonna argue with you. I mean, you,
Okay, well, right, so when can you have an updated set
Tomorrow.
of plans? Okay, tomorrow. Okay.
so everything else is, from what I see here, is the connection to Brook Lane is acceptable, and that's good.
We haven't said that because we can't do a full review unless we have the updated set of plans.
Let's not play games, okay? Eliminating that building doesn't have anything to do with the connection to Brook Lane.
It has to do with the drainage and things.
It doesn't. Sorry.
Does it have impervious area?
It'll have less impervious area if we
Right,
have.
but is it a change?
Okay, now you want to, okay.
So-
So if we want to go that route, we'll go that route.
So you'll have an updated set of plans to us on February 17th, tomorrow.
No, Bob is saying no.
Hey, you
Bob
just said
Truex.
tomorrow, because,
I'm gonna, yeah.
We will not
Okay.
have updated plans tomorrow, Mr. Chairman, sorry.
No.
I will not be able to.
That's not what you told me earlier.
okay, so, I guess that's open for discussion too then. So let's take a look at other things. Are you all set?
I'm all done with that.
Okay.
You don't-
Good. Sean, you want to come back up?
Just- What I'd hate to see happen is just them start firing plans quickly back to us.
Yeah, no.
It would be a much more effective use of everybody's time if they took the time to coordinate the entire set, address all our comments. For example, it doesn't help if I have an updated site plan, but the lighting plan doesn't match, right? Then I end up writing comments about, well, the lighting plan doesn't match this plan. It would make a lot more sense if they just took the time to think through what they want to do, present what they want to the board, what they want to achieve, what they think complies with the order. Make sure everything is coordinated with that, make sure the traffic memo is updated, make sure that the other comments in our letter are addressed, and then come back with one package, and then I think we're fundamentally to the point where, most of my issues are gonna be addressed. Yes, I'm gonna have some probably minor details just to make sure that you guys are informed, but I don't expect there to be whole-scale changes coming from the drainage design review or the traffic design review. I think it would be, at that point, just sort of, making sure that you're aware of some of the nuances that are with the new plan.
And Sean, I noticed in your report, you talk about fire engine turning radius and access. Is that something that you still need from the applicant?
Yeah, and I want to qualify that. I don't expect there to be a problem. Right? I think this is much better for fire access.
I agree.
But it's a matter of documenting for the record, right? So it's one thing to say it and everybody believe it. It's another thing to have in the record a figure that shows it. And my position is, well, if it's that simple, then it should be easy to make the figure. Just make the figure, then the board has something that they can look at. They can confirm the image in their head with the image on the paper, and then the record is clean.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Board members, any questions or comments?
No, I'm in agreement with you, Mr. Chairman. I wouldn't be ready to approve this at all.
Okay.
I would certainly. Can't hear me? Can't hear me, Judy? I said I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. I would not be in favor of approving this right now. I think as Mr. Reardon has said, we need to follow up on his recommendations and not be out on a limb somewhere, fixing one thing tomorrow and then something else next week. So I think it would be a good idea as the peer reviewer has said, that he come back with a complete plan as it is, buildable, all the i's dotted, t's crossed, and then it should be more amenable to our approval.
Okay. Okay. Being that this is a public hearing, I see a number of people here. Would people want to come forward and comment? Good evening.
Well, as we continue to spin, I just could ask a few questions, so I'm clear on it. Jack Conroy, a butter to Mr. Petrosi's land. To sum up the history, we had the original plan that was approved by your board, correct?
Yes.
And it was appealed by the applicant,
Yes.
correct? Then we had a subsequent plan that connected to Brook Street that was denied by your board.
And the reason,
It was just,
well, it was because he wouldn't pay for the peer review, so
but it was denied.
it was denied, yes.
Okay, so, and what I heard tonight is you have that the housing has said that it remanded back.
They sent the revised plan, once Brook Lane was added in,
Yeah,
it was, Housing Appeals Committee said we were correct in denying it,
okay.
but they remanded it back. Town council, say, am I getting anything wrong on this?
Correct, but first it was found to be a substantial change requiring a public hearing.
Right.
Required-
Came back, the peer review issue came, they denied it, went back to Housing Appeals Committee. Housing Appeals Committee upheld the denial based on the peer review issue, but sent it back for substantive review.
So this is like kind of starting over, meaning you got to go through the whole process
On the
again,
modification.
on the whole modification. So the next question is, are you guys under that timeline of 120 days, 180 days?
We're under a timeline from the Housing Appeals Committee of
120 days,
100
starting from the date of the opening of the public hearing, which is December 6th.
Okay, now I'm gonna comment on that, is he got it opened, but he didn't give you a plan that can be built. To me, it's like, right here now, you don't have anything that clock should start. It starts when it's proper. Because we can keep doing this to the 179th day.
Actually, it's only gonna be 120 days.
Whatever, okay,
Yeah.
sorry,
No,
John.
it's even worse to be honest, it's worse for the board, because normally you'd have 180 days, but because the way it was remanded back to us, it's 120 days. We know the drop dead date for us on this is April 5th.
Okay, so it was remanded back, and you have 120 days to act after the remand or after you submitted?
120 days after we open the public hearing.
Okay, so the public hearing's been opened based upon a plan that can't be built. So we have a nothing burger, so to speak, correct?
Right.
But your clock is still ticking?
It is, absolutely.
Okay, all right, that's, well, you've got a lot more patience than I do. Now, the question I have, though, is since it's being remanded, and is he allowed to change everything on the plan?
In the hearing process, things can change, yes.
Okay. I'll say it now, probably get changed, but from the original and Brook Street, you do not have the same plan in front of you, meaning the existing conditions are not what has been represented. So, we all know he's being fined, he's treed the lot, he's got excavators down there, so therefore, you can't say, here's the house, here's the trees, here's the bushes, gone. It's a barren wasteland. So my opinion, can't go back. It's like, no, this is not what you presented to us as existing conditions. To me, existing conditions stay as they are. They're not a moving target, so to speak. So that's something that really needs to be addressed. My opinion is, gone, resubmit, based upon a whole new plan with whole new existing conditions.
We're under 120 days to.
I understand, we'll take that in
So-
consideration. I'd deny it myself, because he can't present a plan that shows what the existing conditions are today. He's showing what they were a year ago. So that's a viable thing. Boom. Now, he's probably gonna ask for a waiver, in my opinion, you can't give a waiver on something, he's presented this the whole time. You know, the way I see it going, I'm glad you cleared up the 120 days, but you guys are the ones getting stuck with this shell game. Moving parts, and that's what's gonna happen, the moving parts. To me, you know, I give him what I would do, but that's all right. But you did clear up, I think, for everybody and the neighbors, we're trying to wonder how this is going on and on and on and on and on with the housing and how this all come back, so. Okay, I know we won't know when, but now you gotta send everything out to all the boards and committees and everything else, correct?
Once we get the updated plan,
Yep.
yeah, we'll send it out.
Has he refiled everything for all the waivers he needs?
That's another thing that we need, an updated list of waivers. That was on my list for tonight.
That kinda bugs me, the fact that he's controlling the time and when he submits stuff to you. I mean, to me, the 120 days should start when he's 100% ready to go. But I think he's making a mockery of the whole 40B process and everything else, but that's beside the point. So, okay, so you answered all my questions for now, and you're gonna do the next meeting whenever you get the plans, which I don't know how you figure that.
We'll have it, yeah, tomorrow, but we know tomorrow's not gonna work, so.
Okay, but I mean, are you gonna be able to set a time tonight, do you think?
My expectation is we would set a time for when the plans will be delivered to the peer reviewer, and when we would have our next, him to have time, and then our next hearing.
Are you allowed to say after this date, we're just gonna deny it?
I don't think that's something the board would say at this point.
But there's gotta be, I'll look over at Mr. Pucci, but at some point, you gotta say, you can't give us, like I said, one day. You can't give all the boards and committees and everyone else one day, because he's played this little game here. I did like the idea of him going to DEP. I'd love to see that. And I'll see you probably when I'm 100% gray. Or maybe nothing left, but anyway. Tell him to go to DEP.
John, I think Sean has a comment.
What's that?
I think Sean has a comment.
Yeah.
Can I just ask one quick question? So the 120 days, that's until you have to close the hearing, and then you have the additional days to issue a decision, right?
That's what we
Typically
understand.
you would, but I would have to review the remand order again, exactly what she said. Typically, you'd have 40 days after you close the hearing.
But you don't have to issue the decision in 120 days, right?
Typically, you'd have 40 days after you close the hearing, but we would have to check the remand order, because you might have ordered something differently.
In your packet, but I believe it's to close the public hearing.
Right. But Patrick and I have actually, I think today or the other day, you and I talked about the April 5th, and would that actually,
April 5th is the 120th day.
is the 120th day, right?
So you would have to close the public hearing at that point, then begin your deliberations period, at which point you can't take any more
Right,
factual evidence.
right.
Thank you.
At some point, we should confirm with the applicant in writing that that's his expectation as well, is that we have the typical 40 days after the close of a public hearing to issue the decision. I'm not sure if she addresses that in the remand order. And as you know, we had one go up to Housing Authority Committee on a similar issue, but it wasn't filed with the town clerk, remember that?
Right. That was before my time.
No, the HAC ruled in our favor, ruled in the board's favor on that.
Okay. Are there any other members of the audience that want to comment?
Close in 120 days, doesn't address.
Cheryl Hayes Montville, 8 Brook Lane. So now I'm the direct abutter to this project. Respectfully, I don't really think that that's a positive addition. I do have a concern with the disposition of the land on Brook Lane. My house sits right at the end of Brook Lane. I sit right next to what now I guess will be a construction entrance, potentially. I guess I would like to understand what that disposition of land really means and what is the process, if anybody knows.
Have you seen the updated set of plans?
I've looked at them on the web.
So one of the things it shows is instead of the cul-de-sac, a long driveway going into your driveway. So you'd have more of a, it says remove pavement, loam and seed, part of that existing pavement out in front. Now, that's what the applicant is recommending. That doesn't mean that's what the zoning board would say. And you don't actually own the property, it would just look different. It would still be town-owned property out there.
And I guess, some of the town property that's currently there is not well managed at all. So I do have concerns about that, to the point where I've had to go down and clean the storm drains or cut the weeds back or clean the gravel off the street or whatever it is. But, so that's just concerning to me because it's like right in front of my house. So I don't know if if you make that decision ultimately or if it has to go to other boards. Is it like if you say, yes, that's a good plan, then that's what it is, and then, like, it doesn't go anywhere else?
Okay, so seeing that we've never dealt with something like this before.
Oh, so it's new to you too.
George, do you have an idea about what she's talking about with the cul-de-sac? What would become of that and how that's done?
So for instance, if the board said, yes, that's an acceptable plan, and, we vote in favor of that plan, that does change, say, like the cul-de-sac, and I guess there would be the disposition of the land. And does that go to another board, or does that just stay with like the zoning board?
I would need to know more about it. I don't know what we mean by disposition of the land. In other words, Sean had asked if it's a public way, and we know, I would ask the peer reviewer a little bit of the factual on-the-ground information. It sounds more of a factual question than a legal question,
Okay.
but
It's really just a sort of the eventuality I'm concerned about is the old right-of-way, which was the cul-de-sac, becomes a grass area and a couple driveways. Without any clear definition as to who owns what, or the understanding related to that, I could see it becoming a conflict between neighbors, because there's two driveways there. Well, I've been maintaining this, why don't you maintain it? It would just be nice to have a bit of clarity coming out of this process as to what the understanding is.
Yeah,
And
right.
my expectation is that it would stay in the public realm. It would just be free to be maintained by the abutters. But what I wanna make sure happen is that the discussion is in a forum where potential parties that could come into conflict about that can have a discussion and
it could potentially be the subject of conditions from this board. Has Carl weighed in, or?
Well, that's, I was just gonna bring up, should be probably brought up with DPW and engineering as well as select board as road commissioners. I mean, if it's
Yeah.
a public way.
Yeah,
So,
I remember the last iteration of this, Carl had some recommendations on the other road, I would think.
yeah, it was in the original, or
Is
the
Carl still
application.
around for the town?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
yeah.
and I'm happy to talk through.
So-
Yeah, you probably want the comments from Carl.
Yeah.
To really get to the point of your question, there's the plan shows a driveway coming across what's now the cul-de-sac. That doesn't mean that's gonna happen, cause it's gonna have to be approved by other people besides the zoning board.
Okay.
And as I had said, you're gonna wanna get comments from town officials like Carl and that give
Also the
their
selectmen,
opinion.
cause they're the road commissioners. Yeah.
Okay.
The local boards, sorry, through the chair, this board has jurisdiction over local rules and regulations, so if they want the input from the town engineer, they need to get it, and then they could potentially condition things based on those recommendations. Same thing for like Board of Selectmen. So it probably is within this process that conditions would come out of that.
Okay. And then I'm assuming if it had to go to other boards and if there was a hearing, then like the residents could go and, you know, speak whether they're upset or not.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing is in this Tetra Tech review, it talked about construction traffic. So I may have read into it a bit, but what I read into was that now all the construction vehicles are gonna be coming down Brook Lane and sitting in front of my property as they cut through the other property, and we become a big construction site. And is the exit the same way? Or do we know yet?
So what the peer review identifies is that, not for you, but for the town in general,
Right.
accessing the property through Union Street and Brook Lane is better than going all the way up to Pleasant Street, taking a left, and coming down Burns Ave. You might not like it.
No, I don't.
Right. But I hate to say, it's, you know, when you're looking at the number of people that are going to be disrupted.
Oh, it's easier to disrupt 3 homes versus like 15 or 20.
Right. And we don't want to pit neighbor against neighbor. That's not what this is about. But, you know, when we look at something like that, it's like, also, what's the direct route from the major
It's going to
highway,
be
which
Route
is
1.
Route 1, right. And it would come by towards down Brook Lane. That's,
So I would ask, like, in your consideration, that somebody actually think about maybe like entrance Brook Lane, exit, you know, out Burns Ave or something versus like all of it, you know, coming through what was once a quiet street, which will no longer be a quiet street. I would just ask for consideration, you know, of that. Also, the last time I actually spoke with Lou was back in 2020, so I'm certainly interested to see, you know, kind of any thoughts or ideas he has about Brook Lane, because if you're coming down Union Street from Pleasant, you pretty much have to come to almost a complete stop to turn into our street. It's not like that coming from Route 1, but it's a blind turn. I've almost been taken out by a few cars who are coming down there to turn around because they want to go in the opposite direction. That is a huge concern to me. Also, the parking on Brook Lane. I'll be coming with pictures at the next meeting, but when it snows out, like, you can barely get 2 cars, like, past one another on that street. And that's a huge concern if you're talking about increasing the traffic, the parking, and then clearly it's a safety issue for the children. I have a daughter, my neighbors have young children. You know, at one time, that was kind of like their playground, basically, which will be no more. But again, like, what safety mitigations can be made during construction, you know, and then if this gets built, or when it gets built, you know, what will the safety parameters be? Because people will come racing down that street. I can guarantee you that. And the other thing that I really want the board to consider is no-through access. If you make that an entrance, exit Brook Lane, or you can go either way, that will become Route 1. Because you can tell people all day long, it doesn't save you time to use that as a cut-through. And I can guarantee you, if people perceive that, they're going to do it. I mean, it's just like water, path of least resistance. They're going to do it. So I'm really strongly against having that as a through street for everybody, for the people on Burns Ave and for the homeowners on Brook Lane.
okay. Thank you. Okay.
Good evening. Robert O'Leary, Precinct 3. If I heard you right, due to the modification, you're going to be going over everything that you've posted online regarding waivers and conditions? That will be a public hearing, will that be, to go over?
That's what we're doing now.
Item by item?
But we're not, I mean, that's, the waivers, will be going through the waivers after the hearing, and that's what the zoning board always
So
does.
if we have questions on them, we'll be able to bring that up as you go
No,
through
because the
them?
hearing will be closed at that point. So we need to get from Mr. Petrosi a list of updated waivers for this project. And we're gonna have a date when he can do that for us.
Okay, has any progress been made on the clear cut that took place? By what I've seen, I haven't seen if there's anything in writing regarding how that was allowed. Is there anything in writing showing that?
So, who wants that one?
I mean, I'll be happy to answer that. That's not in your jurisdiction, unfortunately, because there was I'll be
Yeah,
as clear
go ahead.
about it as I can. I didn't issue the determination. There was a determination issued by the building commissioner that there was certain as-of-right site work allowed there. Not with regard to 40B, but just as of right, what he would be able to do with or without a permit. And apparently work went forward there that everybody's very unhappy, not everybody, but people have expressed a lot of disapproval about. But there was never an appeal of, there was never a zoning enforcement request made to the building commissioner that was then either approved or denied, that was then appealed to the board. So you really have no enforcement issue concerning that. And I know Conservation Commission has recently raised some enforcement issues regarding what happened there. But really, there's nothing in your jurisdiction right now about whether there was a zoning violation there.
Okay, does
So
that-
it's not in writing?
No, so
So there's no connection to the modification?
he had the right to do what he did. And that's,
What's the cease and desist order about, and what's Ashley Clark's letter referring to it? What's that all about? Is that
That's-
nothing?
Yeah, cease and
That's-
desist issued, and they, had a back and forth, and it resulted in, a discussion about what the property owner could do, and he had that discussion with the zoning with the building commissioner. That
What-
went forward, there was no zoning complaint made to the building commissioner that was then acted on and appealed to your board. So that's really the only information that the board has regarding that. There really is nothing in your jurisdiction. It has nothing to do with the modification, and it has nothing to do with the 40B permit. The building commissioner allowed certain site work, allegedly as of right. And I don't know if it was correct or not. I didn't really opine on it, but that's what happened.
But you said it was conditionally granted that they could do this after submission of approval of final signed and stamped civil engineering, landscape, and architectural plans. How is that not applied to you?
He did not do the work pursuant to the conditions of the permit. He did it because he conferred with the building commissioner about what site work was as of right, not in relation to the comprehensive permit.
What about site plan? That would include site plan?
I don't know anything about site plan. It had to do with, I don't know what else is required.
Well, this board here is concerned with site plan. They're acting as if,
No,
no, we issued a comprehensive permit, it's not a site plan.
right.
It's, if you're used to thinking about normal developments and things, that's not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a different set of rules. We're dealing with the rules of 40B. And it's sort of, we issued a 40B comprehensive permit that said no site work until all these other things were done. And the applicant went ahead and did work which was determined by the building inspector to be as of right. town council, correct?
That's exactly right. So all those conditions that you're pointing to are not, he didn't do the work pursuant to the comprehensive permit conditions.
So he changed his mind.
He conferred with what would be as of right, and he got that determination from the building commissioner. That's
So
it.
all we can do is interpret that as his decision, yet vague.
I don't think we can speak to the intentions of the applicant. It's not within our jurisdiction. I don't know how else to put it. If you have a zoning enforcement concern, you take it to the building inspector. The building inspector makes a determination, and then that determination is subject to appeal of the board. Until the building inspector makes a written decision that's appealable, the board has no role whatsoever.
So you don't have a written decision.
We don't have jurisdiction.
But didn't you just say it was appealable to the board?
If
Yeah, somebody brought in
somebody-
enforcement.
If somebody brought a request to the building inspector to take zoning enforcement action, and the building inspector decided not to take enforcement action, then you could appeal that determination to the board. That process did not happen in this case. That's why we don't have jurisdiction.
Thank you.
I know it had nothing to do with it, but you gotta say it. I filed with Mr. Yanovich, who went off on his own. I have yet to see anything in writing that allowed him to do what he did. In your decision, I know you can't do anything to get all the permits. That's you guys. But just to clear it up for everybody, this guy just hip shot, there's nothing approved, there's nothing. And in the zoning bylaw, it's very clear. It says, and I put it in back in the late 90s, no clear cut until you have an approved development. I sent that back to him. Supposedly they shut down. At least I would hope, and I'm gonna use the word taxpayer, that was enough for him to take action on it. And he didn't. And guess what? He left town. So that's where we are. Now, since I've got those emails, I guess I'll have to push it like that myself, because to me, that's enough to say that is a complaint. He should have taken action on it, or he should have said you're wrong, which he never did. So, I know it doesn't have to do you guys. You may see it soon, but I just wanted to clear it up. He didn't have the right to say it. There's nothing in writing, nothing. It just went, go ahead, have at it. But we still have machines down there today. I don't know what they're doing. They're just sitting there and shouldn't be doing anything, so. But just want to clear that up so everybody understands. Will you be here for that appeal?
I can't predict the future.
Okay.
You don't bet on football
No,
games.
anything through the chair, right? Thank you. Okay, yes. Mrs. Campbell, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Kathy Campbell, 35 Burns Avenue. I actually did have a question about the 120 days, and I'm sorry, Patrick, I didn't quite hear what you said, but I was looking at the remand. There's on bullet number 5, it references 180 days from November 18th. Just ask that the board, if you wouldn't mind, check that date and advise if that's, okay.
So in the conclusion is where it mentions the 120 days from the start of the public hearing, which was to commence no later than December 6th unless agreed upon by the town.
So it is the April 5th date?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And Mr. Chairman, I just have a comment. Obviously, the same comment I've had, the easements that Wall Street indicates they have are in dispute and are subject to litigation. Wall Street admits that they don't presently have that right. They're seeking jurisdiction and court approval right now. And for what's presented here with the ZBA and what's presented with the Housing Appeals Committee, the alleged easements used for this project are overloading from parcels 115 and 119, which Wall Street admits from their own plans comes from a different title change and therefore cannot be part of that easement getting into 136 and 137. Thank you.
You said, yeah, we're familiar with this claim, and now that's being litigated outside, that's being litigated separately? That's in court? You have a
The
court
whole,
case?
the whole easement issue is in court.
Is in court, okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anybody else? So, Mr. Petrosi, we need to get an updated set of plans that shows what you can build in your latest proposal. And we also need an updated set of waivers that reflects the plan that's will be before the zoning board. When can you have those items and do we need anything else?
Well, to Mr. Reardon's point, all supplemental information that goes along with that change should be updated to reflect the change. The updated site plan.
So a full updated site plan that represent that, and even things from Mr. Reardon's letter, such as the fire truck, and anything in Mr. Reardon's letter. So how long do you need to get a set of waivers and an updated set of plans to the zoning board?
March 2nd is the next meeting, and then March 16th. I mean,
I heard from my engineer, who's graciously sitting on the chair there, that he can do it in a week.
Okay.
I'm not preparing everything on that list.
You're not gonna do
So,
everything.
Okay, then let's go through the list and figure out.
Yeah, you gotta tell them what you're expecting to submit, because I'll be submitting revised site plans and updated drainage reports, that's it. I won't be doing the lighting plan.
Does the lighting plan change with the movement of buildings that you're going to have?
I don't believe so,
Yeah,
because
Tetra Tech
the
is
lighting
saying
plan
yes.
is for the roadway, and the roadway is not changing, so.
Okay.
John,
I know.
Tetra Tech is
Yeah.
saying yes.
Sean, go ahead.
The plan still needs to change because the background would change. So if the lighting plan shows buildings that are not on the site plan, it just creates unnecessary confusion and turmoil. Ideally, everything gets
Everything.
packaged together, clearly stating what Mr. Petrosi's proposal is to the board. Then we look at that, and we issue our letter.
Every single
One
thing.
plan set that covers everything and it's consistent throughout.
Ideally, yes.
Yes,
Okay.
and that's a reasonable thing for the board to ask for.
Well, we've submitted a lighting plan and a landscape plan separately, so now you're telling us
Things,
you want them all.
things have changed.
All together.
Things have changed. So it
But-
has to,
I'm just asking the question, I understand there's some changes. Are you saying that you want that all in one complete plan set with GLM stuff, or do you want it
I don't know.
submitted at the same time as GLM?
I want one set of plans,
I'm not sure.
a plan set that has everything and it's consistent. The lighting plan shows where the buildings are in the lighting plan and the same buildings in your site plan,
Okay, fair enough. What else?
okay? And a revised set of waivers for what you're requesting, and the reason for the waivers,
Sure.
okay?
That's it?
May I add?
Yeah, Bob.
I think you heard some comments tonight that I think would be, should be explored further, such as what's gonna be done with the balance of the cul-de-sac, what you propose there, if maybe you should have further discussions with the neighbor about what would be acceptable there.
We haven't opened that.
Also,
I was gonna say, you should probably discuss with the town as well, when we have the revised plan set.
yeah. And also the discussion about what, if any, traffic signage mitigation should be done at the end of Brook Lane. There was discussion about making that not a through road, we would.
Well, let me ask the board, what is the do you think it's better to have it not a through street? Or, you say you don't want to design my project, but now you're asking me to give consideration to comments. I'm not gonna redesign the project to not make it a through street unless it's preferred. So tell me what maybe the board can give a consensus. I don't necessarily need it tonight, but maybe you could give some thought to what you think is better, whether or not it should be one way in and out, or should it be a through street? And that's a reasonable question to ask at this point, since it's been brought up by one of the abutters, so. I'm happy to consider either way. It may affect the placement of buildings, since we're talking about placement of buildings and units and stuff, it's gonna affect that, if that is, depending on how it's designed, if that were something that the board was thinking about conditioning.
I think it's appropriate for you to come to the board showing what you're proposing as far as whatever's gonna make the project safe, and, you can have alternate plans, you can have, one way, you can have two-way, and you can present that to the board.
Right, well, in the past, in the previous process, we had a concern that we were being over 750 feet to the cul-de-sac. If we reverse the equation and put it off of Brook Lane, we're gonna have the same question of being over 750 feet. So
But you don't have a dead end.
currently, no. But what we're talking about as an alternative potentially is that not making it a through street and making it a dead end. So it's a 50-50 deal, so.
So, Mr. Petrosi, we have a plan in front of us that you've already said, well, it's just gonna be moving of some buildings. We've asked you to revise that. Now I'm hearing that it might be a,
No.
One way in, one
One
way
of
out?
one of your members has asked me to give consideration to the comments made by someone from in a butter.
so give them consider them.
So I'm asking the board, do they have a preference at this point as to which consideration should be prioritized over the other? That's all. It's a simple.
Again, I don't know the answer, but you don't have to necessarily do a cul-de-sac. It could be through signage, it could be through speed bumps or whatever. I don't know what other, to discourage through traffic.
Okay, well, I'm just responding to your comment, and I'm not asking you to redesign my project, but you're asking for a consideration be given, and I'm asking the board, what kind of consideration are you thinking about, if you are thinking about it? So,
You'd have to see the plan.
all right. Maybe we'll come back with,
I
is
do
that
have
the
a quick-
consensus?
Is the board allowed to vote on the currently submitted plans that are not approved by the DEP and not able to be reviewed by the board's peer review at this point, right now?
So could we,
Well, we have a set of plans in front of us that were submitted in December that were already in May, so 7 months prior, had a set of conditions set out by the DEP saying that it was unfeasible to build this. 7 months later, the board still is sitting reviewing this plan that is not conducive to what the DEP required, and now with our peer review is unable to actually give us a perspective on the project without multiple considerations. I don't see why we need to continue to entertain, other than the 120-day limit, this application. I guess I'm just curious if the board wanted to, and I'm not saying we would, but is there anything restricting us from currently voting on the plan that's proposed in front of us that's denied by the DEP?
town council, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, you can close the hearing and deliberate and vote at any time. And if you think that, the information is inadequate and that justifies a denial, that, the risk is always, you have further time to get further information while the public hearing is open. You go ahead and deny it now, be sure to appeal to the Housing Appeals Committee. Then you end up with the Housing Appeals Committee essentially as your permitting authority, because.
On this set of plans?
Right, and they're fine with incomplete plans.
Right, ones that have.
They'll say, board, grant the plans, grant approval, and it'll be subject to state, state requirements. It'll be very bare bones. So you won't have any reasonable conditions, and you'll have.
Something where another state agency has come out and said that these plans are invalid. Okay.
Correct.
I guess that was,
I mean, that's your risk.
right,
It-
instead of, right.
And that's why, it's tough, and frankly, you are coming up against the deadline. And, you want enough time in the hearing to get as much information and to really vet the project, the modification, as you can. And now you're at a pretty late stage with, that you're still not having that substantive discussion, about potential conditions. So you want to do it sooner rather than later, but you're absolutely right. You can close and vote at any time. Typically the way it would happen is he would be seeking the approval from you first, then later on in the process, it might end up with a superseding order from Mass DEP. Then he comes back with a modification of what was approved if he has to make some tweaks to the plan in accordance with the superseding order. So it's weird in this case because it's been so long going back and forth between you and the Housing Appeals
Right.
Committee that that process with DEP has gone forward. But as Sean had recommended, you know what the requirements are, so it makes sense to look at what the applicant really wants to build in accordance with those constraints.
I think on December 6th, if we had seen a set of plans that proposed the modifications that the DEP mentioned, then that would be typical. But where we're seeing the plans that were submitted on April 21st,
These are the same plans, you've had these plans since November 18th of last year, 2 years ago.
2
actually.
years ago, but the
The same plans.
DEP came out in May saying they should be modified.
DEP
And here we
came
are.
out with, they gave us the option. They gave us the
You're
option.
exactly right.
All right.
It's not their, it's
So
not valid.
could we close it? Yeah, but then it would go to Housing Appeals Committee, and then we'd have no local control over it.
But if we get the plans on April 4th to review, is that gonna be adequate time for the board and peer review to do?
And we're not talking about April 4th. That's why, that's what I want to nail down. Mr. Petrosi has already said that he'd give a revised set of plans and updated list of waivers.
1 week,
Okay, so 1 week.
we'll have,
Okay, and that would also include fire truck access through the site, traffic flow, we just talked about that. And you can have different options, how the traffic's gonna flow, whether it's, we're
can
gonna
I
leave that
ask
up
a
to you.
question? Are you looking for a turning analysis for just the entrance in from Burns Avenue or throughout the whole site?
John,
Okay.
get him down, because Truett said he couldn't have every single thing.
Yeah, so, one of the things, we have a two-page, it's two-page, pretty clearly outlined, 10 points on Mr. Reardon's memo here. And Mr. Truax, you said you couldn't have everything on this?
I'm not gonna provide a lighting plan. I'll provide the site plan updated, building layout, I'll update the drainage report to reflect that. And then I'll give you I'll run a fire.
Why no lighting plan?
That's gonna do lighting.
It's done by a separate,
Done by the lighting. I don't do it for all measure.
And if that's not part of the package,
I know it's not a showstopper, but it's only fair that we have a set of plans that represents what's being proposed and what's being built.
if you have that plan before you, as part of the decision, you should be okay. There's not likely much to come from that plan, but it needs to be part of the package again to form the record.
So you don't need that to complete your review necessarily.
I will need it to complete my review, but it will only take a minute to look at it once I see it.
I just
So-
don't do photometrics.
So you have somebody that does photometrics. Okay,
we have two, landscape plan and a photometric plan. Those are the two that Rob does not get involved with.
okay. So how long is it gonna take to get a full set of plans, which includes landscape plan, photometric plan, drainage, everything, the regular site plan, wetland delineations? How long is it gonna take us to get that set of plans to Mr. Reardon so he can complete the
I
peer
just said
review?
1 week.
Okay,
I'm trying to push this along so the board has plenty of time to review.
okay. So how long are you gonna need to review it after
I'm
that?
gonna need at least a week, but I also asked for a narrative,
Okay.
just describing how the plan, again, setting the landscape. So I would like an updated letter from Mr. Petrosi, just restating what he's asking the board for.
Do you mean the list of waivers?
But he had a cover letter which provided a nice summary of the
Original.
changes last time.
Okay,
What I'm hoping is we get an updated version of that as well,
Sure.
which is updated to reflect what should be the new plan that considers the DEP decision.
okay. Okay, so today is the 16th.
Do we have another, do you have a meeting scheduled?
Under the holiday.
Full moon. So we got, so Mr. Chair, we have March 2nd and March 16th as the next two meetings. If the situation is, if time is of the issue, I mean, the board could consider an additional meeting.
Yeah, well, we can also consider that if we're gonna need more time after the 16th, we'll have 3 weeks at that point. But the other thing is, we can ask for a continuance from the applicant,
An extension.
an extension, yeah. Which, seeing that we make it very clear that we didn't get the plans until less than a month, we didn't have the peer review completed less than a month from the closing time, that would be clearly noted. Breaking your heart?
My heart is there for it. It's in the right
Okay,
place.
okay,
It's in the right place.
Okay, okay, we'll see. So, you're gonna have all that information to,
When are we, when's your
what I was
next
gonna
meeting? The
say.
16th? Is it what you're talking about?
2nd to the 16th of March, so.
yeah, the 16th.
Let's do March 16th.
March 16th.
We'll get everything into you.
You're gonna get everything to Mr. Reardon on the 24th?
What's today?
Today's the 16th. The 23rd is a week,
Yeah, so
everything to him.
Thursday, well,
it's Friday.
Thursday, the 24th. And I don't care if you send it directly to Mr. Reardon, but also make
I
sure,
was gonna say, if you could distribute to my office, so if I can send to the peer review as well as department heads.
I wouldn't submit anything without submitting it to Patrick. first.
Yeah.
right,
Patrick's
okay,
the hub.
so,
He's the
but,
hub.
Hub would be-
so,
And if he wants, I'll forward everything.
okay, because you can do it electronically. Okay, so he'll have that on the 24th.
And may I ask, do you want hard copies for the board members, or is,
Yeah.
I mean, we've been submitting huge amounts of copies of things, so,
And then Sean, you think you can get it done in about a week?
I reserve
Okay,
until I see this submitted.
okay, okay,
There's a gentleman that wants to speak, Joe.
okay. Yes, somebody wants to speak, come on up.
Yeah, I have a question on Mike Bosky, 29 Burns Ave. So is the section of road that he's gonna be going through a public way or a private way?
What road are you talking
Well,
about?
he's coming in Brook Lane,
Right,
and then he's magically going through the woods and going out Burns Avenue. That piece of road, that his development, is that public or private?
well, that's tied up in court right now. I think Mrs. Campbell made the
Not
point.
the end of Burns Avenue, his development. So he's going between Brook Lane, right?
Right,
And he's gonna go out to Burns Avenue.
yep,
So when he goes through that, is that a public road
okay,
or a private road?
it's gonna, yeah, it's gonna be private,
So does the town of Walpole have any other places where a public road goes in and then you go across a private road and you go back to public road?
there's many
Does that make
places
sense?
where it goes public road into a private road.
Driveway and then
Yeah.
onto another, so it's a cut-through,
Yep.
but the cut-through is private property.
Does anybody know, I mean, to answer your question.
Does the
I-
town of
have to
Walpole
look into
allow
that.
that, I guess?
What's that?
I wouldn't know offhand. We'd
Yeah, I
have
don't
to
know.
look at it.
I was gonna say
Yeah,
Swan Pond.
Swan Pond, yeah,
So
Swan
that you
Pond.
can, you can cut through,
Yep.
so it's allowed in the town of Walpole?
I mean, it's allowed any place.
Okay, that's,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, Mrs. Campbell.
Oh, yes, Mrs. Campbell.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, did you say the next meeting is March 16th?
March 16th, right. And we're gonna have the full set of plans and the waivers submitted on the 24th to Patrick, and then Sean will get those, and then we'll have the next meeting on the 16th to review the peer review. And, you know, Sean, I do agree with you, we've gone through this a lot. We're fine tuning it at this point, but we're still behind the process because we haven't had a updated set of plans. Okay. Anybody have anything else?
We were just talking, John, about, I'm gonna confirm with Attorney Tallerman, you know, the deadline. we know the calculation from 120 days, but we do want to confirm, because it's not mentioned in the remand order, that you have the 40 days after the close of the public hearing.
Okay.
Because you'll remember, there was an issue, there was one of the appeals that went to Housing Appeals Committee involved that
Yep.
for this.
Okay.
And we prevailed on that issue, but we would rather not litigate it again
Right.
on a similar thing.
Okay, so yeah, so if we can nail that down, otherwise we're gonna have to make a decision, and I think Drew Delaney made the point where, could be a very easy decision if, we don't have time because of actions of the applicant. Okay, so this case will be continued until the 16th. Do we have to vote on that?
Yes.
To,
You have to move to continue the public hearing
Okay.
to that date.
So could I have a motion to move the public hearing until March 16th?
So moved.
Moved by Jane,
7 PM here.
7 PM, Town Hall. Second by Drew. Anything else to add on that? Okay. Regular board members on this, all those in favor of continuing until the 16th, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained, so carried. Okay, so this is continued until the 16th. Everybody's got some work to do on this. Thank you. Okay, we have some minutes to approve from the. So we have minutes from February 2nd, and I was not here for this, so I won't be voting on it, but have people had a chance to review?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'm here now.
Yes, how are you?
I do have some questions on the minutes.
Okay, go ahead. Questions on the
Okay,
minutes?
the question I have is, there seems to be a few things missing, but in particular, and Mr. Fitzgerald might not agree, but he had asked for clarification regarding pedestrian. I thought it was entrance and vehicular circulation, so that, if that was what you were
Yeah.
looking for, I'd like to see that in there on your behalf, okay? And Mr. Delaney inquired about including affordable units, trash, utilities, drainage, snow storage, and traffic study. And the minutes reflect that Mr. Merrickin responded to Mr. Delaney's questions. I'd like to see Mr. Merrickin's answers to Mr. Delaney's questions in the minutes. Okay? One of the neighbors, Mr. O'Leary, or a concerned citizen, he had issues with, I know it was referenced in other places, but he had concerns with traffic safety, particularly the left turn issue. So I'd like to see that put in there. And although we said the board, at the end, the last comment, board members expressed interest in a traffic study. Not sure what top. Oh, to assuage, okay, big word for me. Public's concerns. Note the importance of getting comments from water, sewer, police. I believe we also included fire in that. And prior to that wrap-up, I had made a comment regarding the zoning board's purpose, and maybe it doesn't seem to be important, but I think it is, that I just discussed or talked with the board that we're supposed to promote public health and safety, including to lessen congestion and prevent overcrowding, and to encourage housing, and that my comment was I thought this was a very dense project for the neighborhood, even though it's allowed, and I really would like to see that in the minutes.
Okay, so I think the best way to handle this would be if you put in your comments and submit them.
Okay.
And then we can vote on it. We don't have to vote on these tonight. I
Okay.
think it would be best if we had a clear set of the minutes to reflect what took place at the meeting.
And-
One thing, you just said zoning, one of the priorities of zoning is housing.
That's in our purpose. Housing
that?
for all residents, yeah.
Right, well, it's to, the zoning board of appeals is to work with the zoning bylaws and, you know, and
Right.
basically, it's an adjudicating board for the zoning bylaws. So,
I know what you're saying, and I know what I was saying, and I was pleased that Drew asked about affordable housing, and I believe the answer was no.
okay,
It was.
None at this time.
okay.
Or none
Well,
at this time, so.
Then that should be in the,
Yeah, because, I mean, and I had the opportunity to look at some minutes from a prior meeting, so the case that was postponed. And and I understand people have different styles of taking minutes, but if you compare these notes and minutes, not just this one, but prior to, and look at the case notes on the case that was withdrawn, these are very thin. I think they looked to me better as, you know, Mr. Lee asked such and such and such, and the answer was, and it was just, I'm not saying it has to be word for word, but I think looking back at those minutes, it gave more detail on what the board was actually discussing,
Okay.
rather than, because it looked like everything got lumped together. Like, my comments were lumped, so if I said something a second time, it was lumped in with the first time. And I know we're trying to be brief, and I know we're not taking word-for-word minutes, but I think the sentiments of the board members should be reflected in the minutes.
and with the video, we can do, it's.
Right.
It can be done, so, okay, if you have.
I'll put
if-
those in.
If anybody else has other comments, please get them to Stephen, and we can vote on a full clean set of
Okay.
minutes the next time. Okay, upcoming meetings, our next meeting is on March 2nd, and then, of course, we just continued the 40B hearing until March 16th. Does anybody have anything else for the board? Okay. That being, nobody said anything, so does anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Jane, second by Drew. Okay, all those in favor of adjourning, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained, so carried. Okay, good night, everybody.